Hello. Hey, how is everybody doing? I would like to talk tonight about a political Tower of Babel. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I think everybody knows the story of the Tower of Babel in the Bible, right? It was a tower so tall that they were expecting to reach heaven with it. And I guess the theory was if they reached the heavens, then they would make themselves as God is, right? Well, let's modernize the concept a little bit. Let's say that the central planning of everybody else's lives is a little bit more closely replicated as the idea of playing God. All right? So, as we're all trying in our own democratic sort of way to control all of our neighbors and control our communities and vote our way into freedom and security, we've kind of built the Tower of Babel. Because we're all trying to play God with our votes. And instead of having autonomous communities, having self-directed communities, we have a bunch of top-down, pseudo-intellectual bullshit that we have to wade through in the form of regulations. Now, as we all know, bureaucrats like to think of themselves as the ultimate intellectual. But they often fail on the very face of the policies they're trying to enforce. Add it all up, and what you have is a tower to the heavens. Over 330 million people, all trying to control each other, all trying to build this political Tower of Babel. And I would like you to try to see this from my perspective for a second, and try and talk to a socialist. What you'll find very shortly is that you and the socialist, are not speaking the same language, right? You hold the same values, but apparently you can't speak the same language. Nobody wants to see innocents get hurt, right? We want to defund the police as libertarians who want to see smaller government, and they want to defund the police, but we're not capable of speaking the same language. Well, a lot of people would say that's by design. We're all being divided by these central planners and everything else. But you have to understand that the hooks are there and we're all on them. We're part of the society. So when we're not capable of speaking the same language as someone who is supposedly our political opponents, what does that make us? If not for one of these people to be scattered to the winds. And a lot of people try to say that nationalism is the thing that binds us together. I disagree. I think it's our ability to logic and reason our way out of problems. Like I've been saying, if there is a political Tower of Babel, we have no one to blame but ourselves and our propensity to try and control our neighbors. That's where we're at. The place where we are today would be impossible without our participation. I would encourage each one of you to remember that as the Blue Hats march down your street using the National Guard and LRADs, the big old fucking sound transmitters. We have no one to blame but ourselves and our inactivity, our inability to try and learn a new language. That's on us. That's not on the Blue Hats. That's all on us. So we decided we weren't going to take the first opportunity we had to try and end this fucking tyranny and get to know our neighbors, get to know other people in our communities, because we've all been so politically divided. And this is where we're at. The Tower of Babel is because you refuse to get involved. Right? You refuse to get out of your social media bubbles and start to talk with these people. Now, if you guys have been following the situation in Chaz up in Seattle, you'll find a very stark example of the political Tower of Babel up there. These people speak a language all their own. Watching their videos and seeing how they behave, you understand they're not part of the same culture as you. In some sense, they deserve to have a separate culture. Not only deserve it, but they'll bring your society down if you're not capable of communicating your own values to them in the process. So, your survival depends on eliminating the political Tower of Babel. But will you do it? Will you get out of your bubble? Will you try and talk with these people? That's up to you. I've been trying to get you out there and try to forge bonds, create bonding experiences, talk with these people, get out to these rallies, make allies, collect phone numbers, try and create an intelligence network, maybe having an intelligence network of people who might need help, places where the front line is against the government. I don't think enough of you actually realize we are in a war. They declared war on us. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're not all speaking the same language. Everybody thinks that the government is there to protect you until it's very obvious that it isn't. But what does that represent if not for a statement of war? Like, they've declared class war on us. It's based off of the fact that they're a political class and we're not. And therefore, we don't matter to them. Something to keep in mind. Republicans and Democrats, you're not a bureaucrat. You don't fucking matter to them. You're not an enforcer. You don't fucking matter to them. So when people start to bucket the idea of defunding the police, it's because they themselves don't have any better ideas. So let's go over the language of the police, right? Let's go over the history. Let's go over the culture of the police. Policing without a sheriff became popular after the South started using slave patrols as civil patrols, right? So the slave patrols down in the South were not a voluntary thing. You were signed up directly. You were voluntold to join it, right? And then they would go out there and patrol those dirt roads down in the South. This was a long time ago, granted. But the way they structured this organization moved its way up into the North. And in the North, they didn't call them slave patrols, obviously. North and South has always been a division of this country because of the fact that, there was a lot of different cultural elements. So, in the North, they developed these things as city, county, state police. Same structure. Very important to remember. So, slave patrols structured the police departments. Very important thing to remember because we're going to talk about the 13th Amendment next. If you want to, you can look it up right now. The 13th Amendment illegalizes slavery for everyone else but the government. Now, it's very important for you to connect the idea that the police, formed from the slave patrols, are now in every city, county, state level without any sort of election whatsoever. Kind of against the cultural narrative of America, if you ask me. So the slave patrols are on the streets, and no one can own slaves but the government. The slave patrols are on the streets, and no one can own slaves but the government. Very, very relevant facts. So when people say defund the police, I don't give a fuck what comes after. What comes after is necessarily not the slave patrols. What comes after is not necessarily the 13th Amendment. But you have to get involved. You have to get out there. You have to form those connections. You have to form your own militias. You have to get away from the idea that the state is omnipotent and always here to protect you. You have to get away from that, because we do have a dark history. And each and every one of you need to realize that. So, this is the political Tower of Babel. So if you're more conservative inclined, you're less inclined to understand the fact that the police did come from slave patrols. The 13th Amendment makes government slavery legal. These are things leftists talk about, and they're not wrong. These are facts. These are cultural elements in our society. And if you're not thinking about that when people say defund the police, guess what? You don't have any basis to talk with the leftists at all. Right? If you start from these basic facts, you can now speak their language. If you do not, you got nothing. You're trying to talk fiscal conservatism to people who want justice. The fact of the matter, there's a lot of justice to be had. Right? So, keep that in mind as the country splits into several different pieces and you clamor for the blue hats to bring order back to the society. Thank you all for joining me. I will make more videos next time. Bye.